I want to begin this morning by reading to you from Psalm 103, verse 1. Hold on. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. I have always been a dog person. When we were growing up, we had this beautiful black lab pointer mix named Poco. And one of my favorite things to do with Poco was to give her ice cubes in the kitchen because she loved to play with ice cubes. She would suck them off the floor and slurp on them in her mouth, but it was so cold she couldn't hold them in her mouth very long, and so she'd shake her head frantically while she was sucking on it and then let it go, and it would go flying across the room. And she was acting as if she had something alive, like a mouse in her mouth or something. And if she didn't think it was alive when she let go of it, by the time it hit the linoleum floor and started skidding across the kitchen, she was sure it was alive, and she would go crazy. She would start jumping and hopping. She would jump on it and pounce on it, but then jump back in fear as the thing shot out from under her paws. She would jump over it to try to cut it off from the direction that it was going. She'd bat at it with her paws, she'd bark at it, and then she'd suck it into her mouth again for a few seconds, shake her head, and throw it across the room again. And as you can imagine, over time, each time she sucked it in her mouth, the ice cube got smaller and smaller until it was just a little sliver, and then it completely disappeared altogether. And that's when she'd go absolutely manic, because she was sure that it was there somewhere and she just couldn't find it. So she'd be running around the kitchen, whining and yelping, and she'd be putting her paws under the cabinets trying to find it with her tail wagging frantically, and she'd be excavating all of the dust bunnies out from under our refrigerator. Whining, whimpering, looking up with me with these sad eyes like, "What have you done with my wily little adversary?" And now just stick with me for a minute here. But I feel like, in a nutshell, that epitomizes who we are as a society in the 21st century and here in the United States. We spend so much time and energy frantically trying to build all of these predictable environments around us, making all of these perfectly structured, manageable little world that we can keep exactly the way that we want it to be. We control everything. There's nothing that's left to the imagination in our world anymore. We control the seasons. It doesn't matter what it's like outside. We wear the same clothes because we control the air con or the heat so that wherever we are, it's all the same. Even day and night, the rotation of the earth doesn't matter anymore because we create light and day wherever we want, whenever we want, inside or outside the house. The seasons, it doesn't matter which seasons, which crops grow, because we've gotten to the point that we can engineer our food to bring it in from wherever so we can have whatever we want on our plate in any season whatsoever. We have caller ID, so we know who's calling us before we even answer the phone. We have ultrasounds so that we can find out 14 weeks into the pregnancy what the sex of the baby is, so that we can call up our friends and say, "Do you have any boys' clothes?" or paint in the nursery or do whatever we want. We have exit polls that let us know who won the election even before we're finished voting. And the rub of this is that as we systematically weed all of the mystery and all of the awe and all of the wonder out of our lives so that we have these predictable, controlled little environments all around us, is it any wonder that we begin to ache for the lack of the awe? Whether you realize it or not, your souls have brought you here to this place this morning. You may have thought that it was your mind and your body and your will, getting up in the morning, seeing that it was cloudy outside, wanting to stay in bed, but getting up, getting dressed and breakfast, getting yourself here to be here in church. But I believe with all my heart that it is your soul that has brought you here, because the soul craves worship. We have been talking about the soul for the last 4 weeks, this part of us, this entity inside of us that gets to the core and the essence of who we really are. No physician is going to be able to put their finger on our soul. No MRI is ever going to be able to measure it or map it. But the reality is our soul, even though it's not our body, it's not our mind, it's not our will, it's the thing that ties them all together. It's what integrates all of the parts of our lives into one whole. We all have this soul. All across the world, throughout the centuries, throughout the ages and the cultures, every people has believed in some understanding of the soul. For the Greeks and the Gnostics, the soul was this very separate thing from the body. The soul was good and the body was corruptible and decaying, and so they saw it as two separate things, and the goal in life was to finally one day shed this mortal body of ours, this corruptible, evil body, so that our good souls could be freed and released. The Jews and the Christians had a very different understanding. They said, no, God has breathed this soul into our bodies. God has created us mind, body, heart, and soul to be one complete good whole, that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and that these things go together. All different cultures, all different religions, all have different ideas of exactly what the soul looks like, how it works, what it does. The Hindus believe that it's recyclable. The radical fundamentalists believe that our soul likes a lot of virgins in heaven. The Native Americans believe that our souls enter into the wildlife that's around them, that watches them and protects them. We hear over and over people who have near-death experiences who say that they sense their soul rising out of their body and then going into a tunnel full of light. Everyone has a different idea of exactly what the soul is like. Every culture, every time, all peoples have always agreed that there is one. And the other thing that they've always agreed on is that when our soul is healthy, we can handle pretty much anything. And that when it is sick or disintegrated or broken or fractured, that everything else in our life will suffer. And so we've been talking about the things that the soul needs to remain healthy, the things that the soul craves. And I think more than anything else, if there is one thing that the soul really craves, it is a sense of awe, a sense of wonder, a sense that we are not our own world, that there is more than what we can create and what we can control and what we can manipulate. Human beings have always longed for this bigger sense, this transcendence, whatever it is. Those who don't believe in God, even their souls long for this awe and this mystery and this wonder. And so they're going to find it one place or another, if it's in romantic relationships or acts of heroism or patriotism or in the mountains or in the ocean or in the arts, they are going to find some kind of awe. And that is why we gather here on Sundays. That is why our soul drags us up in the morning and gets us into this place, because our souls crave awe. What we do here on Sunday morning is a revolutionary step in our modern society. It really is quite countercultural. We are here to resurrect awe in our lives. Which is why it seems a little bit ironic that many churches, and we certainly are susceptible to the same tendency, even in their worship, the one place where we are supposed to come to encounter mystery and awe and wonder, we get so good at systematically trying to weed out all of the wonder and the mystery out of worship. Isn't that true? I mean, we craft our words perfectly. We get the timing down. We make sure that the curtains go up and down at the right moment. Those of us who come, we come hoping that maybe I'm going to hear my favorite song today. Maybe, I like it when they play those instruments. I'm hoping that I'll pick up something here that I can take home and use during the week, right? And yet it wasn't always like that. In ancient Israel, when the Israelites were freed from bondage in Egypt, and they traveled to the base of Mount Sinai, they went there to worship. We sometimes forget, we think of this as mainly about leaving to go to the promised land. But when Moses was arguing with Pharaoh, what his primary concern was that the people of Israel needed to learn how to worship. And he believed that unless they learned how to worship correctly, they were never going to make it into the promised land. And so they gathered at the base of Mount Sinai, and on the mountain was this giant cloud, this thick cloud, and inside the cloud was thunder and lightning and trumpets. And it says all-consuming fire. And it said that the Israelites at the foot of the mountain, they trembled in fear. And we think that this idea of being in awe of God, the mystery of God, the fear and the trembling, we think of that as something that's very Old Testament, but it's not. It's throughout the New Testament as well. In fact, here in the book of Hebrews, listen to the way the author of Hebrews says this, talking about that time at Mount Sinai. He says, "You have not come to something that can be touched. A blazing fire, darkness and gloom and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that not another word would be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. Even if an animal touches the mountain, it shall be stoned to death. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, 'I tremble with fear.' But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel." Our worship is not supposed to be about us. I love what Ann Dillard says. She said, if we took all of this stuff seriously, we would be terrified coming in to worship. We would come fully expecting that our lives may be completely changed, that we may have to do something totally different when we leave this place. Listen, it's one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard. She says, "Why do people in churches seem like cheerful tourists on a package tour of the absolute? Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? We are like little children playing on the floor with chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT. It is foolish to wear straw or velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. The ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us and strap us to our pews. For the living God may draw us out to where we can never return." Can you imagine if every time we came through these doors, we really believed that we were about to enter into a dialogue with the most powerful force in the universe, the creator of all life and all things? Our hands would be trembling when we took the bulletin from the ushers, wouldn't they? Our hearts would be racing as we made our way to the pews. This is not about us. When we realize that our worship isn't about what we get, it's not about this commodity that we consume for our own good, even though it is for our own good, we start to realize that God is at the center of our worship, that this is about what we bring to God. All of a sudden, what kind of music is said, what sort of take-homes is beside the point. Because we are here to give ourselves to God. And when we start to see worship in that fashion, then it's not just something that we do on Sunday mornings, because it's no longer about entertainment for us. It's something that we are giving to God, and so we can do that anytime. When we first wake up in the morning in our beds or in the shower or while we're eating breakfast or driving on the way to work, throughout the day, we start to understand that this is for God. It's not about us. And not only is it not about us, but it's not completely for us. Again, worship and faith and God make life better, but that is not the reason that we're doing this. This day, on World Communion Sunday of all Sundays, we are here to be reminded that not only are Christians of every stripe and creed and church and ecclesiology and theology gathering together all over this world today to share communion together, but today we recognize the fact that we, for one, believe that God has placed this soul that we've been talking about inside of every single human being, whether they believe it or not. It's what we believe. We believe that God has put this soul that is meant to draw us into God's presence and to connect us to each other. And so, we are here to celebrate the fact that every single human being has that divine spark living inside of them, and for us to reimagine and redouble our efforts, our commitment to go out and to care for and love and serve everyone for whom God has given this soul. I feel like this was what made Pope Francis's visit to the United States so special, wasn't it? I mean, he talked to everyone around the whole country, as if they were the children of God. And I feel like even those who don't believe in God, they felt it. They felt like they were the children of God when Pope Francis was here, didn't they? He spoke to each person. He walked up to each person. He didn't care if they were Catholic or Protestant or Christian or Jew or Hindu. He walked up to each one as if they carried that divine spark, as if they carried that bit of their soul inside of them that he needed to connect with, whether it was a little girl who jumped over the barrier. Do you remember that in Washington, D.C. and ran up to the Pope-mobile? Or if it was that Down syndrome man on the side of the road that he walked over to, or one of the people at the homeless soup kitchen that he served at after he had spoken to Congress, or up at that school in Harlem. It was so interesting to me. He talked about ridiculously political things, and yet it didn't feel political, did it? He was able to talk to the Democrats and the Republicans. It was like it went beyond everything because he was talking to our souls, wasn't he? And even when he got up on that speaker's balcony and he addressed the crowds in front of the Capitol building, do you remember what he said? He asked us to pray for him. And he said, even if you don't believe in God, even if you won't pray or you feel like you can't pray, please send me your best wishes. I heard one commentator who said, that's actually the most evangelical thing he could have ever said. Because what he was saying is, whether you believe it or not, I believe that God's divine spark is living inside of you. And I need your soul to be praying and thinking about me. And yet, of course, he didn't say that it was just so that we could stand around holding hands and singing songs and feeling close to each other. He said it was because there is important work still to be done in this world, right? The word liturgy, the Christian word liturgy, it comes from two Greek words, two different Greek words that are combined together. Laos, which is public or people, and ergon, which is work. And so liturgy literally means the people's work or public work. Before the church co-opted it as a religious term, liturgy was a common term in ancient Greece, and it was used for those who would actually work for the government, whether it was military service or building roads or bridges or doing charity work. It was the public work, the people's work. And when the Christians started to call what they did in worship liturgy, it was because they were fully thinking that they were being prepared, that they were being fed, that they were being energized in here to go out and serve people, to serve the people out there. When we come in here to worship, our souls are fed for a reason, so that we will go out and serve the poor and the lame and those who need our help, that we'll go down and build homes in Mexico. The early church, they would come into worship and then they would go out and do the right thing. They would take care of the homeless. They would take orphans off the street and take them into their own homes. They would take care of the sick and the dying and the poor, and people noticed it, and the church grew by leaps and bounds. When we come into this place, if we take it seriously, we don't know the life that it's going to lead us into. And that can be a little bit scary. We don't know what we're going to be asked to do. Maybe we're going to be the church, the first church here that brings a Syrian refugee family and gets them settled in. Maybe it's going to be in your home that family is going to start out until we find an apartment for them. Maybe you're going to be the one who gives them a job so that they have a job here, or the one who takes them around and shows them how to get around our city and how to get settled in and what to do and shows them the ropes. It may be that God is going to take you to a place you didn't particularly want to go. Or make you love a group of people that you didn't think you would ever love just because God loves them. And as you start to love them, you realize that it's expanding your heart. I don't know what it is that God is going to, what liturgy, what people's work God is going to give you in this place, but I know it starts here. Because I know that our souls crave for wonder and awe, and this is the place they come to get it. Amen.